It's lonely out on the ocean, especially at night when the only light you have is from the stars and your own weak lights. The darkness comes in, oppressing everything and taking over like a scourge. Nothing but pure black on a cloudy night. I thought I had seen the worst isolation the world could offer working at Palmer Station in the Antarctic. At least it wasn't as cold out here at Point Nemo, I guess. The furthest point on Earth from any land in every single direction. Point Nemo might be one of the most remote locations on Earth, with a population of 0. Most of the time, at least. There's a small research rig out there, not quite as big as an oil platform, but decent enough sized. I got an offer a couple of years back to go out there and do some studies on the ocean biology out there. Since Nemo is so remote, with relatively stagnant currents, there's a surprising lack of biological life out there. Honestly, it was exciting just for the chance to say I've been to one of the most secluded places on Earth. Getting to study the biome and sea life that was there though, goddamn, I was over the moon. Ecstatic was the understatement of the damned century. I arrived on the platform, a couple of clicks away from the actual point geographically, early in the morning. Clear skies were reflecting off gentle waves in every direction. The deep blue of the ocean here was beautiful, virtually unmarred by human intervention. If anything else, I got some time to read in relative solitude while I was off duty. There were 5 of us at the station. An older guy called Flam was the lead researcher. I don't know how he got the name either. There were 2 assistant researchers, Shannon, a woman in her mid-30s, and Hap, a younger man with a specialty in deep-sea biology. The last person was a mechanic, Sandy, who made sure the everyday maintenance of the rig was maintained. I was the happiest bitch in the world stepping off the chopper and meeting everyone, getting the full tour of the base, including the rec room, gym, mess hall, 3 separate labs, and a surprisingly cozy library. Everyone was nice enough, though Flam was a little neurotic to say the least. Probably important to mention how this place was set up. If you've ever seen a free-floating oil rig, it's a lot like that, just without the ecological destruction. Think of it like a very large ship supported by pontoons, with some parts extending under the water with a larger building up top. What you would call the ground floor is the mess hall, rec room, and gym, with the labs on top and the library nestled in the center of them. Our barracks were below sea level, extending it down with the maintenance area underneath housing generators, gas, etc. It was a nice place, all things considered. A cabin in the middle of the ocean, basically. Settling in that first night was rough. Sleeping underwater essentially was a little terrifying, kind of claustrophobic, and completely fucking nauseating. Despite the large pontoons holding us up, the waves still rocked us, making me feel my welcome dinner warming up for an encore as I swayed. Sandy came walking through, going to the shared bathroom between our rooms. "You alright, Ellie?" she asked, looking concerned. All I could do was shake my head, making the nausea take hold harder in the process. Oh god. She was watching while I puked into a trash can. Hell of a way to make new friends, Ellie. I was surprised when she walked over and grabbed my loose hair, holding it back and rubbing my back with her other hand, gently soothing me as I evacuated everything I ate today. All good. Happens to everyone on the first day. "Please tell me it gets better," I said, gasping for breath and only getting the stench of vomit back. "Oh yeah, just need to adjust. Come on up to the deck and get some air though, it helps." She led me up, walking single file on the narrow staircase. I bumped my shoulders countless times, unsteadied by the surf moving us. At one point I started falling back, losing my balance, and reaching out to steady myself, but only swiped the empty wall. Suddenly, her hand darted out, grabbing my forearm and steadying me. She pulled me back to the step, making sure I was upright before moving further, now holding onto my hand as guidance. Soon she was chuckling. "Hope you're better above deck than you are below." "You and me both." I gagged again, just trying to talk, my head still spinning. The fresh salt air when we emerged from the outer door onto the wraparound platform was like opening a valve for me. I was taking in the deepest breaths I could, finally clearing out the vomit smell stuck in my nose. She leads me over to the platform railing, the dark night settling in around us. I was immediately distracted from my nausea by the beauty in the sky above. There were a decent amount of clouds covering the sky, but what wasn't covered was some of the most amazing stargazing I had ever been privy to. Every single constellation was clearly definable beyond the clouds, with a full moon shining through, sending light in patches to reflect off the water. An infinite sea of stars in every direction. It was beautiful, something that's only on par with seeing the northern lights in their full glory, as far as I've seen. Even in the imposing dark out at Point Nemo, millions of points of light shone through. "What's that?" I said, noticing movement against the water. At first, it looked like the shadow from a cloud passing over, disturbing the stars below. Then a cloud moved from in front of the moon, casting bright light down in all directions. I could see clearly that it wasn't a shadow, but a giant, walking through the ocean step by step. From the distance, it was maybe 5 clicks out. Even then, I could make out its features of it clearly thanks to the size. It towered larger than a skyscraper by my best estimate. Each leg had water reaching up to around the knee. It honestly looked like it was going to break the clouds with its head, but it paid no mind as it whipped them away. Oh my god. I was speechless. I don't know if Sandy was too, but she was staring off into the distance alongside me. If she was shocked, nothing showed on her face, but there was the faintest of smiles hiding underneath. "Your guess is as good as mine, science girl," Sandy replied. I could see clearer now that more were walking behind it, heading to the west of us in a straight path. "We'll need to go downstairs before the waves reach us, though. Sucks for this to happen on your first night." "What? You've seen this before?" I asked, still not tearing my eyes away. The giants were humanoid in build, just like massive versions of people. Their faces were a little more odd. Eyes were larger than normal proportions, and there was a smile on their small mouths that looked like the head was deflating from the bottom like a balloon. Didn't even realize I was shouting when I started talking to her again, gesturing at the goliaths waiting by. They're massive. How is something this big physically possible? This completely disregards every single law of physics. "I just run the machines," she shouted back. "Come on, let's go inside before we get completely soaked." Oh god, now I could see what she meant. Every step they took was sending waves our way, crashing into each other as rambling gates tried to overtake each other. Seafoam was high in the air, and at one point while backing up to the door I swear I felt the water spray from overhead like a spring shower. One of them turned, looking directly at me. I swear my heart stopped, breath catching as I caught a full view of the face. I was frozen, paralyzed that it was going to come for me now. Just pick me up and pop me in its mouth like a damn snack before dinner. The deflated smile just kept on, now widening to show toothless gums. I could hear Sandy behind me, yelling to come with her and that we were in danger, but I couldn't break eye contact with the giant. Something ancient was holding me in place, frozen and waiting to be devoured. Then Sandy pulled me back, still trembling at the behemoths, as they walked away to whatever strange destination would host them. The door was barely closed, but I could still see the one who was looking at me as it turned to follow the others, massive waves sloshing our way as it came. Suddenly, Sandy braced her and me both against the wall, holding on. That's forward," I said, now looking her right in the eye as my hands pressed into the narrow wall behind her. I was still trembling, elbows refusing to stay still as I pushed against the wall harder. Not going to lie though, she was a much better sight to be face to face with than the giants. "Sorry, you'll thank me," she said, barely finishing the sentence before the entire base was hit hard, turning into a steep angle that sent me falling forward, into her even more. Another wave hit, bouncing us briefly into the air as we braced ourselves, trying not to fall down the tight staircase. We tilted back, standing upright once more though swaying heavily, now back to a calmer sea. Best to get back to our rooms before the next patch hits. We scurried back quickly, nausea coming back to me. I couldn't tell if it was that or the contact we just had that was making me warm, blushing as we walked into the small hallway adjoining our rooms. I sat on my bunk, looking at her still standing in the doorway. "What are those things?" I wanted a straight answer, though I don't know if she had one. Like, they were giants, I get that, but what the fuck did I just see? Beats me, none of us have been able to figure it out. She shrugged, leaning against the doorway now. You'll see a lot of weird shit out here. Don't know if the others told you that up front, but they're a bunch of hardcore skeptics anyway. So they've seen it too and didn't think they should maybe tell the new girl about it. What if I was out there alone? I would have died. I was almost screaming, now terrified at the proposition of spending 6 months here. Please, they try to tell me it's a trick of the light and isolation. Hell, I thought maybe I was going crazy, but you've helped me out big time here. I finally have a second witness, she said, raising her hands in exasperation. Goddamn, feels gratifying to not be gaslit into thinking I'm losing my damn mind. I imagine, I said, trying to calm down and not get too overwhelmed this far in. My nausea was still beating at me, making my gag reflex go wild again. This time I'm not entirely sure it was the waves causing it though. I was still coming to grips with seeing fucking giants walking through the ocean. Not to mention the existential dread it was causing was worse than I've felt since grad school. She sat down beside me, handing over the trash can once more. Another huge wave rocked us, sending me flying forward into the wall. I don't know, think maybe since this place is so far from people that it's where old things go to hide or be alone, though some of these things should be left well enough alone, she said, picking me up as the second wave rocked us back. Nothing I've found too dangerous though, so we've got some peace of mind. God, if that's considered not dangerous, I'm afraid to see what else there is, I said, curling up in my bunk and pulling my knees to my chest. I was still warm, with the ventilation on the station feeling more like stale air being fed back through. She only smiled back, giving me a brief goodnight before heading into her room and closing her door. It took me hours to drift off. Waves kept assailing us through the night, and eventually I tied myself to the bunk using my blanket to at least try to stay in place. Unfortunately, it didn't do anything for the nausea, which came and went all night. Every few minutes a smaller wave would rock us, making me fear that one of those things was on their way to stomp us into the depths. Finally, almost asleep, their faces stared me down from behind my eyelids, like the balloons deflating, or even just ready to pop right from their bulging eyes as they just smiled away. Those eyes had something behind them, not malice, at least I don't think so. Apathy might have been more fitting. Every time I remember the one that looked at me making eye contact with pupils the size of cruise ships, it was like a god studying an ant. I was just a bug in their environment, no better than something they would step on during their journey, moving on without guilt. How old does something have to be to get that big? Could these things be older than any of the history we've discovered yet? Good God, my mind wouldn't let me sleep almost as much as the nausea. It was the early hours of the morning before I was finally out, and thank fuck the others must have seen I was exhausted, though only Sandy knew it wasn't just because of the waves. When I got up the next morning, still groggy as hell and searching desperately for the coffee pot, I noticed we had portholes along the outer walls of the living quarters. Maybe it was just too dark to notice before, but after finally getting coffee in my system, I decided to take a look out. At least to assure myself the ocean outside wasn't out to get me. Everything we knew about Point Nemo so far was that it was a lifeless, for the most part, stretch of the ocean. Even just looking at the sun filtering through the water is relaxing for me, so I had hope. Pulling up a chair, I settled in next to the window. Thanks to the shallow depth, it was large enough to get a good view all around, and even bubbles out of the side a little so you have some peripheral vision. Small strands of sunlight piercing the surface finally gave me some soothing relaxation setting in. I was drifting off, gazing out into the blue wonder when it opened. If it was one of the giants, I'm not entirely sure. A huge eye was staring me down through the porthole, two irises meeting in the middle of it to pierce right through the porthole and through me. I felt the same primal fear that had set in the night before, but this wasn't like the giants. I felt malice in this, studying the entire base like we were the ones being researched. It didn't hit me until a moment later how massive it must have been. Only the deep yellow surrounding the irises to tell me how far away this leviathan was. Despite the distance, I could make out every feature. The depths welcome you. I didn't hear it, necessarily. It was like an intrusive thought entering my mind as the irises pulsated, dilating to get a better look at me. Primal fear set in again, telling every nerve in my body to run. Too bad there's nowhere to run in the middle of the ocean. Don't look at it. Sandy was suddenly beside me, snapping the cover shut on the porthole with a quick slam. Huh? I was back, the chill still working its way down my back as I came back to the dry confines of the base. Just don't look at it. It says some awful things, she said, now looking me right in the eyes, more serious than I'd seen her even with the giants. That thing is different from the others. I've only ever seen the eye, but I don't know. I think making eye contact with it is like an invitation. Just don't do it, to be safe. I didn't even have words at this point. I was one day in, already with most of my assumedly broad knowledge and understanding of the world in shambles. Everything I was here for felt secondary, pointless research on algae and ocean bacteria when I might as well have seen a god just hours ago. My anxiety and existential dread were vying for control of every brain cell, and I was the only loser here. Giants were simple, honestly, though I can feel the chill of empty ocean spray to this day, freezing my bones at the thought. If they were the extent of what I saw, it would have been fine. Nothing normal in the middle of the ocean though. The 6 months I spent there felt like they alternated between blissful dreams and the worst fever nightmares I've ever had. A couple of weeks passed without incident. I got deep into my research, taking water samples, testing the amount of microorganisms and other boring science shit that I know nobody reading this cares about. I was starting to get more familiar with the rig and those on it, though it was taking some getting used to. Flam. He was a weird dude, extremely neurotic and always seemed like he was spaced out. Shannon was uptight as hell, usually more likely to bitch at anyone in range than be anywhere near helpful. Hap was nice, though I think he kept trying to awkwardly hit on me without realizing I wasn't too interested in men. Can't say I blame him though, it gets lonely out here. Sandy ended up being one of my greatest comforts out on the cold ocean. In the evenings we would sit out on the platform, watching waves pass by as the sun set on the horizon. Despite everything I had seen out here so far, it was calming, almost serene when it looked like this. I was just losing myself in the sunset, gazing off into the distance when suddenly a skunky smell hit me, almost knocking me back to my college days. "How did you get weed out here?" I asked, turning to look at her lighting up a joint. All she did was laugh at me. "Why, you a cop now?" she said back. We passed it back and forth, laughing as the plant took more of an effect. At some point Shannon walked out, though all she could do was be disapproving and tell us that we shouldn't be doing that here. Sandy's retort made me laugh even harder. "We're on maritime law, babe. Nothing illegal out here." Shannon only shook her head, looking directly at me before walking down to the living quarters. "Remember, we're taking a dive tomorrow morning. I don't want you fucked up when we go down." I saluted, giving a stiff "A, Cap'n," as she walked off in a huff. "Nervous about going down there?" Sandy asked me now, getting serious again. "A little. I know we're not going too deep for this one, but it's still a little terrifying, you know," I replied, looking out at the reflecting sun as it dipped below the horizon line. In a little over 12 hours, I would be taking our small submersible down to the twilight zone, almost 2,000 meters, to see what kind of organic life is down there. I might have been a little excited, because there was always the possibility of discovering some new species. Wonder if they would name it after me. Sandy and I shot the shit for a while longer before finally heading to bed, hoping to get some at least decent sleep before reaching the dark depths. I slept fitfully that night, in fear of what we may find down there. I hadn't seen the giants again, but that giant eye through the porthole the other day was still haunting me every time I tried to close my eyes. All I could hear was its voice, telling me to join them in the depths. After one of the worst nights of sleep I've ever had, we started loading in. The submersible was cramped, with stale air being pumped through for ventilation that left me sweating. Flam and I went down together, with Shannon and Hap staying back up with Sandy as our comms. The only window was at the very front, a small porthole with an incredibly limited view of only what was directly ahead. Maybe the worst part was that other than the console lights and a couple of low red accent lights to see by, this thing was completely dark. I felt like I was crammed into a can, and my claustrophobia was not doing well. The descent was fine, nothing out of the ordinary at least. We went in phases to be safe, dropping a few hundred meters at a time before stopping for a few minutes, making sure there weren't any issues with the submersible. I kept looking over at the small hatch that we clambered in through, a bulkhead and multiple thick seals keeping us from the massive pressure outside. Every damn creak this thing made as we descended, I expected to be liquefied where I sat, lost forever to the depths outside. Even in the stuffy air of the sub, I was getting a chill. Approaching 1500 meters, Shannon's voice coming over the small radio, reaching target depth in about 5 minutes. "Thank you," Flam said, flipping a couple of switches and pushing the shift further. I don't know if that's what it was, but it looked like there was a flight stick installed to control this thing. Better than an Xbox controller, but still. "Ellie, turn on the outside cameras, please." "Copy that," I said, flipping around buttons in front of me. The 3 screens in front of me flashed on, 8 different feeds popping up. We had wide-angle cameras on the port and starboard side, one at the top and bottom of each end of the sub. All the corners were covered, giving us a full view of everything within our radius. Cameras on, powering on lights. The lights outside came on, flooding the ocean darkness around us. Despite the output of the lights, strong enough to light a damn fire back on land if you left it on for too long, we were only able to pierce the abyss so far before losing sight. That was when I saw movement right off the edge of our front starboard camera. My heart skipped a beat, amazed we found something already as we had barely reached depth at this point. "There's something out in front, go forward toward starboard," I told Flam, trying to study what was there just at the edge of our visibility. Flam moved us forward, slowly so as not to scare whatever it was off. Unfortunately, whatever it was, dashed off, but on the screen as it ran away, it almost looked humanoid, dashing off like an Olympic swimmer. "You see that?" "Yes, it's much faster than us though," Flam said, still pushing the flight stick down, propelling us deeper. "Still not there yet." We're at 2000, Flam. "Think we're deep enough for what we're after," I said, looking over at him with anxiety rising. "How much is this thing rated for?" 5,000 meters, he replied, muttering some sort of calculations under his breath while still descending. "I know we'll find it." "Shannon, Flam is going even deeper," I said, breathless into my radio. My heartbeat was picking up, tension rising as Flam didn't even react to my message. "Any idea what's going on?" "Flam, where are you going?" Shannon asked, concern rising in her voice. "You need to come back to target depth. We haven't done prep for a deeper dive right now." "We'll come back up quickly. I just need to check something," Flam muttered again, flipping the radio off so Shannon couldn't interject. "Whoa, okay, Flam, we need to go back up. You're not thinking straight," I said, moving forward to flip the walkie back on. He smacked my hand away, turning with a wild eye reflecting the intense red light of the cabin. I almost fell back from just how much he startled me. Flam may have been a little odd, but usually he was a gentle person, more awkward and introverted than anything. "Flam, what the fuck are you doing?" "They told me I'm welcome in the depths," he said, turning back to the small window and looking out ahead. "I have to see them." "Okay, that's not a good idea, man. Come on, you take monitors, I'll take pilot." "Let's switch," I said, moving to take the console. I felt a sharp pain in my arm, looking over to see he had stabbed me with a lab scalpel he had smuggled on board. "I have to see them," he reiterated. "The last place uncorrupted by humans. They're waiting for us." He pulled the scalpel from my arm, pointing it at me in warning before turning back to the console. I fell back to the floor, clutching the wound and trying to stem the bleeding. Thinking quick, just trying to live while I still could, I tore my shirt off and wrapped it around the wound, pulling my makeshift tourniquet tight. "Stop, take this privilege." Flam was shouting back to me now, voice getting higher and more raving mad with every second that passed. "They've promised to show me knowledge that humans could only dream of, things that we've had questions for thousands of years. You would pass up this kind of opportunity." Yes, we're going to fucking die down here, you idiot. I was shouting again. The monitors were flickering, cameras unable to sustain integrity at the increasing depths without proper protection. I could hear the hull clanging as it bent and expanded, trying to keep integrity in the crushing abyss. Flam, what the fuck has gotten into you? Shh. Look, he said, pointing through the front window now. Beyond him, I could see something in the distance, coming into view better as we got closer. What the hell is this? I was looking downward, our submersible pointed toward the depths as he cut off our lights, plunging us into complete darkness. My eyes took a moment, unable to cut through the most complete, terrifying void of nothing I've ever seen. Suddenly, something far below us started to glow, starting faint but getting brighter and brighter as it spread, soon covering the entire seafloor. Cracks and veins ran through the light, all meeting in one central point, flowing towards a deep, dark chasm it circled around. My first thought was bioluminescent microorganisms, because we find that all the time, on in the abyssal zone. This, though, had to be far too large. It would comprise miles and miles of organisms, all glowing in time with each other before stopping at this one deep pit. It was going further than I could see through the viewing window, off to drop further into the depths below. It blinked. At least, I assume it blinked. The glowing purple came rushing close from opposite sides, meeting completely over the pit and plunging us into darkness for a moment. When it opened back up almost immediately, I could feel a shockwave hit the submersible moments later. The chasm in the middle started narrowing to a ravine, a deep glow coming from the furthest depths. It reminded me of a cat's eye, but the glowing purple started becoming a deep red. All I could feel from this thing was an intense hatred, like we were bothersome and waking it from a deep nap. I acted as soon as I possibly could, grabbing the small fire extinguisher we kept at the back and hitting Flam right from behind with it. Thank God it knocked him out immediately, and I was able to take the flight stick, pulling back as hard as I possibly could to return to the surface. The narrowed slit kept watching us as we made the ascent, me praying to whatever gods may be on the surface that it didn't decide to come after us. This damn thing must have taken up most of the seafloor, whatever it was. Flam was grumbling beside me now, saying something that didn't even sound like a language I knew of. As we rushed to the surface, hull clanging and banging the entire way, I could finally see light beginning to break through the depths, strands of sun filtering down to guide our way. Flipping the comms on, I immediately heard Shannon shouting through the radio, demanding to know what had happened and if we were still alive. Flam tried to fucking kill us, I said, still pulling back as he started coming back to his senses. He looked like he didn't know where he was or how he got there, now mumbling in perfect English about how much his head was pounding. We're resurfacing. I'll fill you in once we get there. We pulled up to the surface, Sandy grabbing the sub with the lift on the platform as we got near. As soon as I felt the thump of us settling on the platform, I threw the hatch open and ran out to sweet surface air. The salty smell of the ocean was one of the most relieving things ever, but knowing that thing was down there, God, I started babbling to Sandy almost immediately when she ran over, pulling me into a hug as I started crying. Shannon called in a medevac for Flam, who couldn't remember a damn thing since the night before. It's like he wasn't even in control. That knock to the head sorting out whatever short circuit was happening. The chopper picked him up a few hours later, still babbling about how he wasn't sure what happened. Waking up in the sub as we were tearing through the ocean for the surface, all he could remember was looking out of the porthole in the living quarters last night, his usual routine to relax before falling asleep. He said the last thing he remembered was seeing something out there looking back at him. I gave Shannon and Hap a full rundown, disclosing to the med team that, yes, I may have given him potential brain damage. None of them were mad, considering the circumstances, but I think Shannon was suspicious. Can't say I blame her. I told her all about what we saw, but her hard skepticism wouldn't. Take the idea of an eye covering most of the seafloor. Sandy believed me, thank fuck. When we talked about it that night, laying in my bunk, I was sobbing uncontrollably because I felt like I was going fucking insane. After I described it to her though, she surprised me. I've seen it too, she whispered, looking me in the eye from across the pillow. Not like you have, but in dreams. It talks to me sometimes, tells me to swim down to it, feel the embrace of the oceans. I don't like it. There was so much hate in it though, I said, grasping for whatever words I could through deep, anxious breaths. It looked like it had nothing but loathing for us. The giants were indifferent, but this thing was angry that we were there. Shh, it's okay, she said again, brushing my hair away from teary eyes. You're going to be okay, it won't come up here. What if it does though, Sandy? It's probably bigger than an entire fucking continent. What if it does come up here? We'll all die, Sandy. I was almost screaming, seeing Hap come around the living quarters hallway with concern on his face. Sandy just shooed him away, making a motion that she had everything handled. If it does, not much we can do, but we can face it together, she said, looking deep into my eyes. It was the first comfort I had felt since arriving, before seeing what depth of insanity was out here. She kissed me, holding me tight as I fell asleep. A week later, and I'm still holding in there. The eye still looks into me from my dreams every couple of nights, but Sandy's been keeping me company, comforting me through the nightmares. I'm not really for all the romance stuff, but she had me. Something about her just set me at ease whenever I was on edge, no matter what kind of stress I was under. We were hanging out on the deck that night, sparking up again and watching the stars play off the waves as the night grew longer. I thought at first that I was seeing a star on the horizon, falling toward Earth, but after a moment she noticed it too, standing up and looking out toward the horizon. A pyre of flame was heading our way, roaring over the ocean and boiling the waves as it went. I could see huge sails with a Jolly Roger emblazoned on a flag high above, the flames burning it but never making it fade. It kept getting closer and closer, threatening to ram us at high speed as the two of us started screaming for the others to wake up and get ready for impact. Their screams were audible over the crackling timber and whooshing flames as it came near, and both of us looked back when we heard them. Dozens of people were standing out on the deck of the ship, all doused in flames, burning high into the air alongside the lumber around them. Some were dancing, others were writhing in agony, but all were screaming and shouting to the high moon above like banshees in the night. It was coming at us, speeding ever closer and accelerating the entire damn time. There was nowhere to go, just Sandy and I stuck here against the platform railing as far as possible from the sailing inferno. We hugged each other tight, closing our eyes in preparation to be tossed into the waves by a burning juggernaut. It never happened. The ship passed straight through us like we weren't even there. We could feel heat of flames, the screams whipping by us as it pulled our screams with it, joining the cacophony of hell on the waves. Then it was gone, racing the other way across the sea towards another destination, screams trailing behind as it sunk over the horizon, water reflecting the pyre even after it was out of sight. "Did you guys hear that?" Hap said, coming up from the living quarters and rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Damn, it's hot down there too." Sounded like a bunch of screaming. Did something hit us? Is there a breach? Sandy calmed him before he got panicky, looking at us in the night. "Just us, don't worry, all good out here." "Oh, okay," Hap said, starting to turn for the door before letting out a sudden, understanding, "Oh." "Not like that," Sandy said, shooing him back down to the living quarters as he left. We held each other, looking off into the night where the ship had disappeared to before she spoke. "Gonna be honest, that was a new one for me." "Jesus Christ," was all I could say, heart still racing as I tried catching my breath. She pulled me closer, brushing my hair back over my ear and humming low, a soothing melody as the night returned to peace, completely undisturbed by the death that just roared through.